Today I'll be looking at episode 5 of The Handmaid's Tale, from the 10-minute mark to the 20-minute mark. There's a lot of stuff in the writing here that encapsulates what a good chunk of the show is about, and what it's trying to do. So the first scene in this section is actually the tail end of a previous scene, but I'd still like to talk about it because it's rather lengthy and follows up on a kinda big-o plot point. So in an earlier episode, June/Offred was taken in to see whether or not she could get pregnant, and it's there that we find out that in this dystopia, should a woman fail to get pregnant from a sterile man, who Waterford so happens to be, fancy that, it turns out the handmaid is the one who takes the blame. So, Serena Joy, not wanting to lose another handmaid, or rather her chance at a child, brings up Nick and how he could help in that regard. This is a really significant moment. June consistently throughout the series often has to choose between two equally terrible options. She either does what the Gilead patriarchy demands of her, survive without punishment, but at the same time contribute willingly to her subjugation as a human being. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar. All for the sake of surviving long enough to find her daughter. Or she can choose to resist, do what she believes to be right for her, or her fellow handmaidens of her own choice, and risk punishment, which usually involves tasers. Lots of tasers. This supposition from Serena Joy. I was thinking of Nick. Nick is loyal, and he's been with us for a very long time. It's her way of suggesting that Nick impregnate June, and it's a subversion of the usual choice, a change to the formula. In order to survive in Gilead long enough to find her daughter, June has to do something which would probably result in her arrest and execution, should she ever be found out. An uncomfortable marriage between the two. This disruption of the regular choice she's given is extremely significant, but we won't really see the exact reason why until a wee bit later, so I'm going to file that point up here for a bit. Just remember it's there for now. Let's move on to what Serena Joy says after June hears about this idea. What about the commander, says June. Forget about the commander, responds Serena Joy. Kind of a weird thing to say about this from a lawmaker of Gilead until you remember that she helped write it. We'll see this attitude more from Fred Waterford in the future, but this idea, the desire to break the law of Gilead from a lawmaker of Gilead to serve their own desires, pretty much encapsulates what Gilead is all about. And inflict the rule of law on others without exception until it impedes your own personal pleasure in any way, shape, or form, in which case they'll bend those rules until they're to their liking. Boy, that also sounds familiar. And the worst part of this is, June has no choice but to go along with it. She can't report them after all. It's a handmaiden's word against the commander's wife. Heck, she can't even get that far. If she can't get pregnant, there's a high probability they'll send her to the colonies, which is implied to be a fate worse than death. The next scene takes place in the market. Janine is overjoyed at her baby's behavior, even imitating her sticking her tongue out. Even when her fellow handmaiden tells her, you really shouldn't talk about that stuff, and the clear subtext therein that she'll probably be killed if she keeps it up. Janine's response? One word. A sarcastic hater. We've seen Janine's slow indoctrination into the Gilead mindset before, and this is foreshadowing for further descent into the lie her commander told her, that he would run away with her when we as an audience know he has zero plans to actually do so. And it's even further foreshadowing for what Janine eventually plans on doing. This is nothing new, we've seen it before, but it's a good reminder of this plot point, and a gauge for where she is mentally at the moment, keeping it in the viewer's mind. Moments after this, we find that the old Ovglen, Emily, is here, back from her punishment, and immediately we can see how much of the fight has been taken out of her. When June asks her if the eyes took her, she doesn't give an answer, and I don't have the original script, but in my transcript, I just wrote, the answer is clear, as her blocking direction. June has to know this. Emily wouldn't have changed households for no reason, but she asks anyway. Maybe hoping, maybe in denial, but either way, Emily was punished cruelly and she knows it. As such, she refuses to give June any more information. However, in denying to help June, she brings up a very important plot point. I don't know anything anymore. After what happened, I'm too dangerous to be part of it. Part of what? Mayday. This is the first mention of Mayday, and it's one of the most significant elements of the show. The word itself acting as a catalyst and motivating June's actions in the final episodes. But it's brought up here in episode 5 first, giving June time to think about what it means and whether or not she wants to be a part of it. Again, having to choose between what will allow her to survive and what she wants to choose. At the end of this scene, Ovglen 2 ushers June away. Offred. There you are, hiding out in the vegetables. That line has subtext plain as day with malicious intent, and paints a picture that this Ovglen is going to be much more of an obstacle for June than the previous one. And the show immediately elaborates with a scene involving June and the new Ovglen on their walk home. After passing a couple of hanging bodies, Ovglen gives June a stern warning about the private conversation she just tried to have with Emily. Don't do that again. What do you mean? I mean of Stephen. I'm not going to let you mess this up for me. Ovglen too goes on to say that before Gilead, she was an addict forced into prostitution, just to buy food. Now in her own words, I'm clean now, I got a safe place to sleep every night, and have people who are nice to me. She brings up the privilege June and her family had before, and tells her that while the old world was better for June, it wasn't for her, which ties in with one of the show's main themes, that making the world better doesn't make it better for everyone. Ovglen too perfectly exemplifies this, because just after saying this, they pass out another hanging body as the scene ends. It's like an afterthought. Ovglen at the moment has the same mindset that those in charge of Gilead have. This world is better for her than the old one was, so why should she try to change the world now? Not even for the corpse that's hanging 20 feet to her right. It's the same mindset she just accused June of having about the old world. Just because it's better for her doesn't mean it's good for her or anyone else for that matter. It also incites the viewer to think about the very theme and how it applies to the world they live in now. Is it better for you? And if it is, who had to suffer to make that happen? Who's being ostracized for the sake of your happiness? And if you're not into helping others, are you still suffering and not even acknowledging it because it's better than where you were previously? Ovglen's perspective perfectly encapsulates this mindset. It's better for you in some ways, so be grateful, says the Gilead's governing parties. From here on, Serena Joy comes into Offred's room, asks if she's ready, and the two proceed to Nick's apartment. As they go, we are given an extended sequence with June's voiceover. I should calm down. Barring the possibility of violent arrest, it's nothing I haven't done before. So how come this time it feels like I'm cheating on Luke? Oh, here we go. Bringing it back. That subversion of choice we brought up earlier. June's lived in Gilead so long now, with that singular choice, obey and survive, or act freely and possibly suffer. This dynamic has been the norm for so long that to act outside the law and survive feels wrong. It's the only thing she can do to survive, literally the only option she has if she wants to see her daughter again, ever, and yet still she feels like she's somehow cheating on Luke, like it was her idea. This shows that she's lived like this for so long that she's begun to associate breaking the rules in any fashion with punishment, to the point where she's punishing herself. This is cemented further by the following scene, and the closing one for this section. It's a flashback of June and Luke getting to know one another over lunch. And the two have a brief conversation about the hypothetical situation in which they would get a room together. The scene more or less provides the audience with information that they already know, with one extra piece, how their relationship began. June got to know Luke, married him, and had a child with him because he decided to cheat on his wife. Morality of cheating in a monogamous relationship aside, that idea that Luke leaving his wife led to the birth of June's child and the solidification of her family is a good one to keep in mind because this journey to Nick's shed is a catalyst and not the last trip she'll make. But the question is, why? And the flashback sort of answers this. June and Luke talk in the hypothetical, but it's very clear in the subtext that they're really starting to think about making this hotel visit happen, describing it in detail. That was their choice, and that's the key word in this situation, choice. This plot point is so important because as a character, while she's walking up to that shed, in her mind, she's hitting that crossroads that Luke was in a way. She's doing this with Nick the first time because she needs to survive in Gilead, so she shouldn't feel like she's cheating on Luke, right? But once again, the subverted choice formula returns to kick her while she's down. So under this formula, she feels she's doing what she has to survive. But at the same time, she's acting outside the laws of Gilead, which, as we know, is associated in her mind with pain and punishment, and yet a sense of free will. So in a way, even though she has no other option, she still feels like it's her choice, since that's usually what acting outside the laws of Gilead constitutes. To drive this point home, we'll talk about what this sets up. She goes back to Nick after this of her own free will. It's an honest-to-goodness choice. She doesn't have to go back to Nick after this first visit, and Nick is not forcing her to. She finally has an ability to consent, or not consent, to something, after years of not being able to do either, which feels just as cathartic for us as an audience as it does for her. While at the same time, she knows she's choosing to do this herself without someone telling her to, and thus feels like she deserves a punishment, hence feeling like she's cheating on Luke. And that's all set up with just one sentence and a flashback. Anyway, that's our 10-minute to 20-minute mark for episode 5. Have a good one, 312.